In this episode, I want to dig a little bit deeper into what functions are. And I have here this page open from Wikipedia. The article is about subroutines. In computer science, a subroutine, also called procedure, function, routine, method, or subprogram, so you can see it has a lot of different names, is a portion of code within a larger program that performs a specific task and is relatively independent of the remaining code. A function is like a program inside a program. Here it says, as the name subprogram suggests, a subroutine behaves in much the same way as a computer program that is used as one step in a larger program or another subprogram. So let's see some small examples here of functions we can create. I'm gonna start writing a very simple function that just says hello. So you can see here, I start writing void, then this is the name of my function, then open and close parentheses, and inside the braces, all the things that will happen when I call my function. In this case, only one thing is going to happen, which is going to be printing hello to the screen. So now if I run this program, nothing will happen because I'm not using this function. I'm just saying that this function, what it does is this, but I don't use it. If I want to use my function, I have to call it here inside the setup. The setup is automatically called. That's an exception. When the program starts, it will call setup. So now it will, when setup is run, it will find here hello, and processing will look, hey, what is hello? And it finds here the definition. Hello is a function that prints hello. So I run it and we'll just print hello down here. And I want to distinguish between a few types of functions. Like this function, I'm gonna write here. This function does not return any value, does not take parameters. So there are functions that do take parameters, and there are functions that do return values. How do I know that this function does not take any parameters? Well, you can see that inside these parentheses, there's nothing. When a function takes parameters, there's some values here separated by comma. I'm going to write a second function that does take some parameters. For example, this will be called print sum. And I have to put something in between these parentheses. These are the parameters, and I have to say which type of parameters they are. So I'm going to say that it's going to take two parameters, which are float numbers. I'm just going to write here, a float is a number with decimals, and an int is a number without decimals. Integer. That's the complete name. So now this new function here does take two parameters. We know already functions that do take parameters, for example, random. When we type random, we can type here, this is one parameter. Sometimes we write two parameters. We also know line. Line takes 4 parameters or more. For example, to do a line between 0, 0 and 100, 100. So this has 4 parameters. So this function I'm creating here, print sum, takes 2. And I just give the variables 2 names. So now here I can print a plus b. What is a? A is whatever I send as a first parameter, and b is whatever I send as a second parameter. So I could call now, after hello, I'm gonna do print sum. So this is calling my new function, and I have to put something inside, some values, like 10, 10. They should print 20. You can see here, it's on the same line. So it's printing the result. So what happened here? When my program started, it just skipped these functions because it's just definitions of a function. No one is calling them yet. So processing runs all over this and starts at setup and finds this call to hello. So the program from here jumps up here to hello, prints a hello, and when the function ends with these close curly braces, it jumps back to the next line and it continues here. And now it's gonna jump to another function, print sum, and it's gonna send two values. It's gonna send these two values as parameters. So it will jump up here. It will write a 10 into this variable and into this variable called A, and a 10 into the variable called B. Then it will start executing here, print. It will say 10 plus 10 is 20. It will just print and then again end and come back, and the program will finish. So now we have seen a function that does not take parameters and a function that does take parameters. And both of these do not return any value. And how do I know that it doesn't return any value? It's because they both have here a void. This word means it's not returning anything. Functions that like no stroke does not return anything. We can see this on the documentation. Reference, for example, no fill. You can see here returns and says none. It's not returning anything. Most of these functions, background, returns nothing. But some functions do return something. For example, random. Random returns a float. That means that when we call random, it's sending back a number with decimals. So let's try to do that. Let's define a third function that returns something. So I'm gonna, instead of typing void, now I'm gonna start typing float. And instead of print sum, I'm gonna call this calculate sum. Float A, float B, and the curly braces. And instead of printing anything, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna calculate, I'm gonna say here float C equals A plus B. So now the variable C will have these two numbers added. And now I can return C. See, C is a float variable and I'm returning this variable. Whatever I return here must be this type. We will see later what are types. There's different, we have quickly seen here that there's float for numbers with decimals and int for numbers without decimals. There's several types. There's another type for text, and there's types for colors and points. So now we have here a function that does return something back. How do we use this? So we could use here, we can say float my added numbers equals calculate sum, and I type here 150. So now after this line is run, it will come down here. It declares a variable. This is a new variable called myAddedNumbers, and it's gonna put some value into this variable. What is it going to write there? Well, it would be very simple if here I just had a fixed number. We know that this way we just store this value in a variable, but we have a function here. Well, this is like similar to random. We have seen that when we call random and two values, then it's gonna give us a random number between those two values. In this case, it's gonna jump to calculate sum, and it's going to send there one parameter that will be stored temporarily inside the variable A, and another variable, the B variable, will contain 50. So then it will start executing here, declares a variable C, and it says C is equal to A plus B. That's 150. And then this is the most important part, it's returning a value. It's returning C. This function executes the whole thing, this whole expression contains a value, it's 150. And then this value is stored here. We can see it run. Well, now, of course, I'm storing this variable, but I'm not printing it. So I should print, I'm gonna use print line my added numbers. Let's run it. Well, it's all together. So I'm gonna replace all our calls to print line, print ln, and here print ln. So now we have it in 3 lines. So you can see that it's printing 150. The variable my added numbers has the value of 150 stored inside. So now we have an idea about functions, that there are functions that, like this one, don't take parameters, don't return anything, functions that do take parameters, and functions that return some value after they are executed.